Hello, and you're watching TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Now, what happens when a war drags on too long? The oil money dries up, and the government still refuses to stop spending on bombs and bullets. Well, in Russia's case, the answer is simple. They send the bill to the people. The Kremlin has a new message for the Russian people. Pay up. This war isn't going to fund itself. Now, for years, Moscow tried to keep its economy afloat with a combination of oil exports, fiscal stimulus, and creative bookkeeping. But as the invasion of Ukraine drags on in its fourth year, the money is running out. Russia is shifting from wartime expansion to wartime austerity, and that means the consumers will carry the bill. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
In Moscow, the Russian government has unveiled its draft federal budget for 2026 to 2028, reaffirming its commitment to record-high defense spending. Despite mounting economic pressures and a projected budget deficit, the Kremlin plans to allocate nearly €140 billion annually to national defense, over 6% of GDP, far exceeding NATO's average of 2 to 3%. Analysts say the budget signals that Russia is not preparing for peace, but rather for prolonged conflict. Over 84% of the defense budget remains classified, raising concerns about transparency and the true scale of military expenditures. To fund its military ambitions, Russia plans to raise VAT from 20 to 22%, generating an estimated €46 billion in additional revenue. But with inflation rising and regional economies stagnating, critics warn that the Kremlin's war economy is straining civilian sectors and deepening internal recession. Russia's aggressive posture places it among the world's top military spenders, both in absolute terms and relative to its economic size. The message is clear. For Moscow, military strength remains the top priority.
Now let's zone in on the East Planning portion of our show. Now, beginning next year, Russia plans sharp hikes in alcohol and tobacco taxes. The move aims to plug a growing budget deficit.
The government in Moscow has submitted a bill to raise alcohol excise taxes by over 11%, affecting both strong and light drinks. Wine and sparkling wine will see even steeper increases, up to 31%. Beer taxes will rise and tobacco products are also hit. Cigarette excise jumps 11.3%. The government expects to raise more than €2 billion from taxing harmful products between 2026 and 2028, a key step to cover a budget shortfall projected at nearly €40 billion next year.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Now, in the early phase of the war, government spending in Russia ballooned. Moscow injected huge amounts of cash into the economy, fueling growth, raising wages, and pumping up industries tied to the military machine. But high spending collided with reality: sanctions, labor shortages, and limited production capacity. Inflation spiked, peaking in double digits. The central bank was forced to slam the brakes with punishingly high interest rates. Yes, inflation showed this summer to 8.1%, but at what cost? While lending dried up, businesses struggled to access credit. The civilian economy suffocated while the military-industrial sector kept humming, much like setting your house on fire just to keep the garage warm. And now even the garage isn't looking so hot. Russia's new economic forecast shows stagnation across the board, growth stuck at 1%, lower than expected oil revenues, and a strong ruble that hurts exports. Investment projections are down. Real incomes are down. Industrial production, also down. Now, the only thing going up is the tax burden. Now, here's the master plan. The Kremlin will keep defense spending near record levels, just under 40% of federal expenditures. Meanwhile, the rest of society gets to live with frozen budgets, rising taxes, and fewer services. Moscow wants to raise the VAT, or sales tax, from 20 to 22%. That's 1.2 trillion rubles a year, taken straight out of consumers' wallets. And it doesn't stop there. Small businesses, already hanging by a thin thread, are next in line. Under the new rules, even modest operations, a kebab stand or a convenience store will be forced into the higher VAT bracket. Why? Well, because Moscow has run out of options. Cutting military spending is practically impossible. Borrowing more means competing with businesses for loans, driving rates even higher. And now the only lever left is squeezing consumers and entrepreneurs. Everyone from street vendors to factory workers is now enlisted in the war effort, whether they like it or not. Moscow frames its war as a historic mission, a fight for sovereignty, a return to greatness. But in practice, it's a giant cash transfer scheme, siphoning rubles out of consumers' pockets to prop up a bloated military. Russians are told to celebrate, quote, victories in Ukraine, while standing in longer lines, paying much higher taxes, and watching their real incomes shrink. Now, the message from the Kremlin is crystal clear. The war is here to stay, and so is the bill. And the Kremlin has made its choice. Guns over butter, missiles over medicine, expansion over prosperity. The question now is how long ordinary Russians will keep footing the bill, and how long the state can actually keep squeezing before the system cracks. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Ruslan Stefanov, Program Director at the Center for the Study of Democracy. Ruslan, thank you so much for being with us here on Eastern Express.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's get straight into it. So let's talk about Russia's 2026 budget, which is revealing quite a stark reality. I don't know if I should say a new reality, but it's keeping the war going means consumers must pay more for less. Ruslan, is Russia's economy effectively being strangled by its own war spending? What does this all mean?
I think it's very clear. First of all, when we get the numbers, these are the official numbers, which mean these are part of the Putin's war machine propaganda. I mean, so very often when we comment, we say, okay, these are the numbers. What do they tell us? Well, first of all, I'm sure we don't know all the numbers. We don't see the numbers. A lot of the spending on the war is hidden in, pushed to private companies, which is essentially very difficult to speak about currently in Russia, pushed through different channels within the state-owned companies, and all other different methods of behind the balance, so hidden from public view. And this was the first. This was done very early on in the war. All the data that we were, for example, looking at the Russian central bank and different other sources, it was first of all taken down. Very often it was we were shut off out of that data, and then it was doctored, of course. So I would be very careful when looking at the data. But what we could still say is that the Russians are now forced to essentially agree or show that actually there is a problem, that both the revenues from oil and gas fall, but also to let know that they would need to spend more, to essentially continue the war. And that means besides all the direct costs of the Russian economy, the Russian society are taking on now, it's also going to go on a collective level, meaning that they're going to put more funds into funneling this war.
But let me ask you this. I mean, with everything you just said, how are actually Russian ordinary citizens reacting to this? I mean, how much more can they realistically take this entire burden?
Well, I think we've seen this for many years, and also back in Soviet Union times, that the Russian consumers are not really very demanding in that respect. So I think we're not at a point where the pain has been real for a long time. So I think this will most probably not produce the dent that we all want to see. The fact that the Russian society would be unhappy and see that it is a war of aggression, that it is a useless war, that essentially all the killing that goes on in Ukraine is essentially just for the to satisfy the imperialistic desires of the Kremlin and not serve the Russian public. I mean, essentially, before the war happened, what the Kremlin did was it subverted all the different and took over all the different civic organizations or ways of the society to express its opinions and also to be sensitized. So it's all essentially all the channels that we typically have, like including the Duma, including the parliament, including the civil society organization, including business associations. They're very careful, and this is all carefully orchestrated and aligned. So I don't think that we will see a reaction that we would normally in a democratic society would have seen a long time ago. Essentially, I feel like the loss has to be much more significant. And when I say that, I mean, it means that we have to reach a level where economic sanctions leads to the fact that there is not a single energy and oil and gas revenue that comes from Europe or from the West, which is currently not the case. China is still buying a lot of oil and gas. India is buying a lot of oil and gas. So I think this is very clear that the Russian economy is not in a hole that would cause so much pain in consumers.
So you're saying, from everything that I'm understanding, Ruslan, so from what you're saying, for instance, I mean, let's take a small scenario. To my understanding here, also the costs of tobacco and alcohol prices are going to rise. So, I mean, are you really saying that ordinary citizens are not going to be impacted at all, or actually feel this impact? I mean, in the broader picture. And let's talk. I mean, it's one thing talking about Moscow, St. Petersburg, but let's look a little bit at the villages, right, and on the outskirts of other Russian towns. Are you really? Can we really honestly say that, again, ordinary Russian citizens won't be affected by this?
No, they will be affected. I'm not saying they're not going to be affected. They are already affected, and they will. I mean, definitely, they see the stagnation. They see the the lack of focus, the lack of opportunities for development, and particularly for the younger generation. I mean, essentially, there is a huge constraints in terms of development opportunity, and of course, people do feel that. But what I'm saying is, the combination between stagnation and very high levels of fear and suppression is not enough to let us see this play out in the political realm. I don't think that this will actually come out in politics somehow, and that the Kremlin would feel people are unhappy with the war in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is they are feeling it, but they are afraid to say so. And also the institutions that typically translate these voices to the political level are not there. They're captured, they're taken over by the Kremlin, and we are not going to hear the voices of the Russian society. And I think this of course is kind of the very traditional, I would say, for Russia, suppression of discontent and of truth. And of course it mounts. I mean, this will add a little bit more pressure. Which the combination between rising prices, lack of opportunities, and also the very clear idea that Russia is becoming an appendix to the Chinese economy, also will lead gradually to rising discontent. What I'm saying is that this budget that we're seeing now and the pain that the Russian economy is clearly in, because it's with all the enormous spending, with all the spending just of lives and of money and of other resources like gold and whatnot. With all of that, the Russian economy cannot grow at the wartime economy growth. It's still almost stagnating. So that means the pain is not there. but also the opportunity is not there. And what we are likely to see is the continuing growth of pressure within society. But I'm skeptical that this will actually bring any political consequences, or that it is already at the brink that will create any political consequences because of the suppression that we've seen for many years. Both of these institutions, but also of direct physical suppression. So people are thrown in jail for even for commenting. There were also recent cases in Bulgarian nationals, just for commenting somewhere. You just got thrown in jail. So I think that typical fear mongering is also going to suppress this content that is rising from the economic level.
So Ruslan, let me ask you this. I mean, you're saying that we probably won't see any political consequences, but with everything that you just said, do you think that looking ahead, that it's going to bring economic consequences? I mean, could we be looking at a collapse in an economic collapse in Russia? Just very briefly, because we have under a minute left.
Absolutely. I mean, we're at the point where we don't know exactly what's going on in the Russian economy. We know that the pain is real, and we're seeing that the West is already ready to increase that pain on the economy if Putin continues with his reckless policy. So I feel this might be the case, where this black box could as well collapse, just like it happened with the Soviet economy in the past.
Thank you so much, Ruslan Stefanov, Program Director at the Center for the Study of Democracy, for all your insight here with us on Eastern Express. Thanks for being with us. And we move on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Russia is facing a deepening fuel crisis, and now it's looking abroad for help. With nearly 40% of its oil refineries offline, Moscow plans to import gasoline from Asia and roll out emergency measures to stabilize supplies.
Russia is preparing to import gasoline from China, South Korea and Singapore to stabilize its domestic market. It follows the shutdown of nearly 40% of Russia's oil refining capacity, largely due to Ukrainian drone strikes. Russian authorities propose scrapping the 5% import duty for state-controlled companies like Rosneft and applying subsidies to make foreign fuel competitive with domestic prices. The measures could redirect up to 350,000 tons of gasoline and 100,000 tons of diesel monthly to the Russian market. However, analysts warn that high transport costs and limited infrastructure may blunt the impact, especially in central Russia. Ukrainian strikes have hit at least 16 of Russia's 38 refineries since August, pushing diesel exports to their lowest levels since 2020. Western leaders, including US President Donald Trump, continue to pressure Europe to cut Russian energy imports to weaken its war effort.
Russia's Arctic LNG 2 project has hit a new production record, fueled by rising exports to China. But as winter approaches, icy seas and fresh sanctions threaten to freeze momentum.
Russia's Arctic LNG 2 plant ramped up output in September to an average of 17.9 million cubic meters per day, a 14% jump from August. The boost comes despite looming challenges. Ice will soon block the Northern Sea route, cutting off direct shipment east. Meanwhile, the G7 is preparing new sanctions aimed at curbing Moscow's energy revenues. Since last August, 7 tankers have delivered LNG to the Beihai terminal in China, with one more still en route. Shipments rely on ice-breaking tankers, only usable in warmer months. In total, 16 ships have left the plant since 2023. Some gas has also gone to a floating unit near Murmansk, though none has reached buyers yet. China is routing Arctic LNG through Beihai, while importers quietly shift deliveries to other ports. Russia has offered up to 40% discounts to attract buyers.
Once united in their EU ambitions, Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia now stand on diverging paths. Moldova is moving forward, Ukraine is fighting for survival, and Georgia is turning away from accession prospects.
Moldova's pro-European party won big in recent elections, despite alleged Russian interference. But Georgia's ruling party, Georgian Dream, is cracking down. It plans to ban nearly all opposition, accusing them of undermining the state. A court ruling is expected soon. At the UN, Georgia's leadership echoed Moscow's rhetoric, blaming the West and avoiding mention of Russia's occupation. Georgia's opposition, led by Salome Zurabishvili, vows to keep fighting. But with municipal elections boycotted and turnout expected to plummet, Georgian Dream faces little resistance.
And that's all for this episode of Eastern Express. I'm Diana Skaya. Don't go away, stay with us here on TVP World.